Some shifts in global power announce themselves with wars, treaties, or revolutions. Others arrive quietly, almost invisibly through outcomes that seem temporary, technical, or regional. Venezuela belongs to the second category. What is happening there does not resemble defeat. There are no surrender documents, no collapsed institutions that signal finality. Instead, something subtler is unfolding. Influence is no longer being contested. It is simply becoming less relevant. This is the moment empires fear most, not when rivals challenge them openly, but when their presence stops shaping decisions. Venezuela has reached that point, not because it has grown stronger, but because the mechanisms that once constrained it no longer dictate its survival. The uncomfortable truth is that power is slipping without resistance, and history shows that once this process begins, it rarely reverses. The surface explanation frames Venezuela as a familiar case of political failure, corruption, and mismanagement. According to this view, the situation is the predictable outcome of poor governance and economic isolation, but this explanation misunderstands the nature of the moment. Political decisions matter, but they are not the driver here. The decisive forces are structural, not ideological. What is unfolding is not defiance, collapse, or resilience in the moral sense. It is adaptation within a changing system. When the environment that once enforced obedience loses its exclusivity, behavior changes automatically. Venezuela is not resisting pressure out of confidence. It is adjusting because the cost of exclusion has declined. That shift does not reflect strength or weakness. It reflects altered incentives. For decades, control over Venezuela required remarkably little direct intervention. It operated through architecture rather than confrontation. The architecture was financial. Oil was priced in dollars. Transactions cleared through institutions aligned with a single system. Access to insurance, shipping, credit, and settlement depended on compliance with that system's rules. This arrangement created discipline without force. States complied not because they feared invasion, but because exclusion meant economic paralysis. Participation was not optional. The structure rewarded alignment and punished deviation automatically. Power did not need to be exercised constantly because it was embedded in the system itself. The rules governed outcomes more reliably than coercion ever could. The system did not fail suddenly. It weakened through repetition. Sanctions, asset freezes, and financial restrictions were deployed with increasing frequency. Each action was justified, often effective in the short term, but collectively they revealed something dangerous. They demonstrated that the system could be weaponized, and more importantly, that survival outside it was possible. Once alternatives began to function, dependence became a choice rather than a necessity. The moment sanctions stopped producing collapse and instead produced adaptation, the architecture lost its coercive power. This outcome was not accidental. It was predictable. Systems designed to be universal lose authority when exclusion becomes routine. China, Russia, and Iran did not respond emotionally to this opening. They responded structurally. China's role is transactional and stabilizing. It provides scale, settlement mechanisms, and long-term demand without political conditions. Its interest is continuity, not control. Reliability is the product it offers. Russia's role is strategic friction. It does not seek dominance in Venezuela. It seeks to raise the cost of intervention and prevent unilateral outcomes. Presence alone alters calculations. Iran's role is instructional. Decades of operating under sanctions have produced expertise in alternative trade, logistics, and settlement. This knowledge transfers easily to others facing similar constraints. None of these actors aim to replace one hegemon with another. They aim to ensure that no single system can dictate outcomes. Bypass, not overthrow, is the logic. Beyond Venezuela, the message resonates clearly. Middle and regional powers do not interpret these developments through ideology. They interpret them through risk assessment. If exclusion no longer guarantees compliance, then dependence becomes exposure. Rational actors hedge. They diversify reserves, trade in alternative currencies, and cultivate multiple partnerships. This is not alignment against anyone. It is alignment with optionality. Sovereignty increasingly resembles portfolio management. Commitments are structured to minimize vulnerability rather than maximize loyalty. Influence becomes conditional, reversible, and transactional. This shift does not require coordination. It emerges naturally from incentives. History provides a familiar pattern. Financial dominance erodes before political authority collapses. Reserve currencies lose exclusivity gradually, not through sudden abandonment but through dilution. Institutions remain intact long after their centrality fades. The transition appears orderly until it is irreversible. Empires rarely recognize this phase as decline. They interpret it as temporary disruption. But once alternatives are credible, restoration becomes impossible. What follows is not collapse, but normalization. Power continues, but no longer commands automatic compliance. The system persists, but it no longer governs outcomes alone. Venezuela is not an anomaly. It is an early indicator of a broader transformation. Systems built on exclusivity lose leverage once alternatives function. Power constrained by its own tools becomes selective, cautious, and eventually negotiable. The defining feature of the future is not confrontation, but irrelevance where authority once operated unquestioned. What is unsettling is not that influence is contested, but that it is no longer required.